Trials of a Royal Guard. By Ansel. Chapter 9. Dreyri River. The wind whipped past me as I dove through a hailstorm of poorly aimed crossbow bolts. The griffins on the ground were panicking more and more with each passing second. A single, taller male stood in the middle of the bunch, trying to calm them down and reassure them. He kept pointing at me and the dragoons at my back. A few of his soldiers took a couple more shots, but then they started scattering. I fixed the tip of my lance towards the tall griffin and pumped my wings to pour on additional speed. He waited until the last minute to try and get out of the way, but he was relying on his instincts too much. He flew up exactly where I'd been aiming. The lance struck true to end his life quickly and without much show. I hit the release to let it and him fall before I banked and landed on the back of one of his subordinates. That griffin had been trying to get away, but Dread Knight followed a strict rule: if they didn't offer to surrender, he didn't ask. A quick flick of my sword and he fell from the sky, too. These weren't the well-trained and veteran troops we'd be running up against. Not in the least. The others that were scattering didn't fare much better. Lancers from my company had been true to their name and skewered them. We started to land as our part of the battle drew to a close. Take the hill, destroy the enemy artillery, and dig in. Easy enough for us. It was time to catch our breath and regroup. I landed and trotted over to where my first target had fallen. I pushed his body over and looked down. On the collar of his armor was a golden talon. A colonel. How about that? Another dragoon landed next to me and pushed his visor up. You got a colonel? It seems like we're finally getting through. I nodded. So it appears. 2 months and we'd moved the line forwards only tens of kilometers, but it was more than we'd done in a year. Sergeant Major, get with the section commanders and get me a count. Yes, sir. Clement Knight responded before hurrying off. Tumble landed next to me and stretched. I can't believe you let him be a dragoon, he whispered. I can keep an eye on him like this. He was going to volunteer for combat no matter what. I don't like him, but I can't just let him run off and get killed. Just like I can't let you do that either. I'm not, 100 years old. I snorted. He's been swinging a sword longer than we've been alive. Now be quiet, don't let anyone hear you. Ze Sergeant does not whisper as quiet as ye ought, Captain Bringia said as she landed beside me. But I know you spoil I'm so. It is because he is cute, yes. She grinned and shook her brown and crimson tail feathers. Tumble's face turned bright red and I chuckled. Yes, that is exactly it, Captain. Then I ought not blame you. All enemy forces en retreat, sir. Very good. Have the dragoons set up a perimeter and dig in. We haven't been this far south in a long time and I don't aim to give up this ground. Aye, sir, she replied before hurrying off. Clement returned. His visor was down and my gut wrenched. I didn't show it, though. No, all any pony or griffin around me got was a blank face and a single word. Report. Alpha Section, 12 minor injuries, 2 major. Bravo Section, 6 minor, 1 major. Charlie Section, 11 minor, 6 major, and 1 killed in action. Who? I asked coolly. Brassbeak. Brassbeak, I repeated, etching the name into my mind and soul. Young griffin. Very talented with a lance. That was all I knew. Very good. Get an honor guard and collect him. Lay him to rest up here for the others to see. Sunder a lance and break his chainmail for the others. Bring me a ring. Yes, sir, Clement said before trotting off. Another link on my bracer. Another name to remember. Another letter to write. Another family to crush, and we weren't even back to Dreyri River. Though from where I stood I could see it and it ran chills down my spine. Where is the major? He's dead, sir, don't you remember? He was killed in the blast. You're in command now. Sir, sir. Look at me, sir, are you okay? I need you to focus. There was water around my hooves. At least I hoped it was water. It looked a lot like blood. Tons of blood. Sir, we need to retreat. Who said that? There were still ponies on the other bank, cut off from us. They'd be slaughtered if we retreated. Sir. Captain Knight. Order the retreat. My vision snapped back into focus, the sounds of battle hitting my ears. Sir. No, sir. No. No more, I growled before reaching into the river and picking up a lost sword. We have ponies on the other bank. Every pony with me. Enough is enough. Something deep inside me snapped and anger flared in my chest. The remaining soldiers gave me a look as if I was daft. They hesitated, but that didn't matter. Enough was enough. I leapt out of the water and flew forwards to where the others were stranded. I collided with the nearest enemy griffin, knocking him from his claws. I flipped my sword around and drove it down, dispatching him before moving towards the next one. He swung wildly at me. I ducked, hit him in the gut twice, and pushed him back. It's the captain, some pony shouted behind me. The griffin came at me again and grabbed my shoulders. It was a foolish move. I drove the sword into his gut, twisted it, and knocked him over. Every pony with me! I shouted. All around me, the reaction was instant. The group that had been cut off remembered their training and started to lock shoulders. As they did so, another griffin drove a spear towards me that I barely managed to avoid. It clipped the shoulder plate of my armor and knocked it free. I felt something bite into the flesh beneath, but all it did was make me angrier. I leapt on him and drove my sword home. I'd been so violent with it that I couldn't get it free. I let it go and picked up his spear. A spear was good, actually, it was great. This would work perfectly. Enough was enough. Without warning, something knocked me onto my back. I struggled to get back up, but I just couldn't. My body wouldn't move. Sir. I struggled more. Sir. My eyes opened and fixed on Clement. Sir, are you all right? You were howling. I wiped my hoof across my eyes. I'm fine. What time is it? Just before sun up. You may as well get up now. I know every pony else is. If we're lucky, the griffins down below heard you and are moving out. After that, I sure want to. Thanks, Sergeant Major. You don't have nightmares? I asked as I started to slip my chainmail on. Every night, sir. Since the last 2 wars. Let me help you with that. Clement waited for me to get my chainmail on before he started helping with the plates. Good to know. Any movement last night? Clement nodded. Plenty. They moved to the other side of the river and brought up additional soldiers. I'm pretty sure they've got earthworks, too. Plus some of those fancy new stone throwers that you love so much. My nose wrinkled. Those stone throwers were Pegasus killers. They'd load hundreds of smooth metal orbs into the thing and just fling them. They were impossible to dodge, and even our heavy armor wasn't enough to stop it all. Great. Any chance they're going to counterattack? Whoever is running that unit doesn't seem to be stupid enough, no. They want us to come to them. All right. I'm going to fly down to Brigade Command. Tell Captain Bringia she's in charge. Yes, sir, he replied before leaving the tent. I peered over at the cot opposite mine. There was a pony-sized lump under the blanket there. Tumble, get up, I called. There was no response, so I went over and pulled the blanket back. He was still asleep. Despite everything, the straw-colored stallion never had trouble sleeping. I poked him with a hoof. Get up, Sergeant. We're due at command. He stretched and set his hoof on my nose. Snooze. I set my hoof on the side of his cot and shook it. Tumble gasped and almost fell out, his eyes shooting open. Wah! Get up, Sergeant. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir, he squeaked before flopping out of bed and starting to get ready. Bringia was right, I did spoil Thunder Tumble a bit. I couldn't help it. He'd been with me for almost my whole career. He was like I used to be and had a pretty mare to go home to. When he got his chainmail on, I started to help him with his plates. Thank you, sir. I'm sorry, I was sleeping. It was a really good sleep, too. Only good dreams. We were back guarding Princess Luna. Me and you and Miley. Every pony, really. Even Lavender. I sat his helmet on his head and smiled. That sounds wonderful. You can tell me more about it on the way to HQ, come on. He nodded and grinned. Of course, sir. My shoulder was rubbing up against Reggie's as we crammed into Brigadier Hammer's tent. There simply wasn't enough room for all of the battalion and company commanders. Add in all of the specialist leaders and it was a really uncomfortable situation. Reggie looked sour. Not that I blamed him. The last time we were here had been a nightmare. Dreyri River was nothing but a huge graveyard. Brigadier Hammer came in and we all stood at attention. At ease, he called before moving to the small table situated in the middle of the room. Before I get started, I want to commend you all for bringing us this far. I realize we'd all like to be further south, but that just wasn't in the cards. That said, General Ironhoof wants to take advantage of our momentum. It is time we push past Dreyri River physically, mentally, and emotionally. I realize that for most of you this was a pivotal moment of this war. I need you to bury your fears and inspire your soldiers to do the same. The Sudramore are hoping we get stuck here. They know this place was a nightmare for those that survived it. If we can break through, we're truly going to shift the balance in this war. One of the colonels cleared his throat. Sir, they're dug in pretty deep over there. I hope the general has come up with one of his clever plans. It is funny you mention that. He has. At least I think so. The brigadier rolled out a map. He tapped the dead center with a hoof. We're in the center and we're going right across on hoof. Come again. Reggie called from where we were. Hammer grinned. It was unnerving. You heard me. We're going to cross the river on hoof, in the center, right into their fortifications. Reggie balked. Well, at least we'll be dead quickly. Actually, Major, I believe we're going to be just fine. We being really important too, because I'll be leading from the front. The assembly of officers began to voice their concerns and objections. Brigadier Hammer simply stood and waited. Eventually, everyone became aware of it and fell silent. Done? Good. Hear me out here. The Braider set a black square on the map. Dragoons in front. Let the Griffins see them coming. Great. I'd already almost been killed in the river once. It was also where I'd completely lost my composure and killed 20 or so Griffins. All of the rage from Russet and the others had just boiled over. It was risky, it was stupid, but it ultimately saved lives. The rest of the brigade will advance behind them on hoof. No flyers at all. We'll have artillery coverage from the hill Major Knight took, of course, but the general intends to have the whole army lined up and marching forwards. We'll be pressing the attack along such a long line they'll be stretched thin. Sir, with all due respect, on the surface that sounds like a horrible plan, some pony said. Oh, it was me. I'd said it. Normally I'd agree, Major, but you're not going alone and neither is the army. You're taking the lead because you're providing security for me and some siege unicorns. We're going to be leveraging massive magical power against their fortifications. And we're going to do this all under the cover of the temple guards. They'll throw up barriers in front of us as long as they can. It should be enough for us to cross the river and put all kinds of hurt on them. I blinked. That wasn't a horrible plan. If we were using the temple guards to shield us, that was why we weren't flying. This was a massive movement, though. Do we actually have enough temple guards to shield the whole force, sir? No, not the whole line, but we're going to break through in the center, cut their force in half, and drive them back. The flanks will not have as much unicorn coverage, but they'll also lag back a bit once we start putting extreme pressure on the middle. And how many temple guards will our brigade have access to? I asked. 2, came a strong, clear voice. Even in the tightly packed tent, officers started to move out of the way as 2 unicorn mares made an entrance. The first was tall, slender, and had a look that demanded respect. Her silver temple armor complemented her glimmering golden coat and snow-white mane. I'd only ever seen her once before, the day the princesses had declared war. She was on the balcony with them. Exemplar Feral was beside her and, despite being ancient, tall, and fit, she looked somewhat less impressive next to her peer. Brigadier Hammer bobbed his head. Aptly timed, Exarch Glory. We were just discussing the plan and your role in it. Indeed, Exarch Glory replied before hopping up onto the table. All present may rest comfortably knowing that thine enemy's weapons will not pierce the barrier presented by myself and Exemplar Feral. We shall lead you to safety on the other side. Let it be known, however, that the barrier only stops fast-moving objects. Good to know, the Brigadier said, looking up to where the unicorn now stood on his battle map. Exarch, if we could just... He idly tapped the map. You're standing on my dragoons. She looked down and then nodded. My apologies. The Exarch hopped down and moved to stand beside the Exemplar. Proceed. Brigadier Hammer cleared his throat and replied, Thank you. I've put together the battalion assignments. We attack this afternoon. Prepare your soldiers. Dismissed. An afternoon attack? The same day? The general was pushing this fast. It made sense though, the longer we delayed, the more time our enemy had. I turned to leave with the others but Exemplar Feral was suddenly beside me, peering at my visor. You remind me of my friend, Silent Night. Again? Exemplar, it is me, Silent Night. Her head tilted and she looked closer. I'm not yet certain. Silent Night is a warm pony. He has a sense of humor. You've been bathed in blood. I can't see past it. My jaw set. Not by choice. I am Silent Night, however. Can you not see that? I can. I wish to make certain that you can. I look forwards to standing beside you this afternoon. As do I, Exemplar. I just wish the circumstances were different. Indeed. Until this afternoon. She slipped out of the tent. I slipped my visor down and waited a bit before following after her. When I got outside, Thunder Tumble stood to attention. So, we attack this afternoon. Fly ahead and let the captain know. I'll be along shortly. Yes, sir, he replied before streaking off. The camp was already in a state of controlled chaos. Soldiers moved everywhere under the orders of their officers. It was unlikely we'd form up without the enemy being aware, but that didn't matter. They were dug in. They were hoping to capitalize on the crushing defeat we suffered here before. Dreyri River. Where we tried to make our stand and were knocked aside as if we were made of paper. The place where Dread Knight was born in a fit of rage and bloodlust. That was what everyone expected from me now. That was what they were going to get this afternoon. Whatever it took to get us home. Major. Pulled from my thoughts, I looked around and found Grey Maelstrom staring at me. There was concern in her storm grey eyes. We'd only worked together a few times after the Harmony, but I always felt like she was familiar. After the Harmony, she'd been in the hospital for a couple of months. That cut into any time we could have worked together. Evidently, the magic she'd used had crushed her bones. I didn't understand how. Something about not being properly grounded, they said. Senior warrant officer, I replied. You look upset. More than the last few times I've seen you. Dreyri River will do that to you. Were you here before? No, I was still in the hospital. I heard, though. I'll be with you tomorrow, so don't worry. We'll get through. My ear flicked. I believe it. I'm concerned about the cost. You're not going to pull any of that crazy crystal stuff again, are you? She snorted. Of course I am, but it will be better controlled. Trust me. I don't intend to put myself out of action again. They only get one for free. Good. I'll see you down there. I need to look to my dragoons. Yes, sir, she replied. I leapt into the air, leaving the shaggy grey unicorn in the camp's center. There were going to be a lot of powerful unicorns under my care and our plan relied completely on them. It was a lot of eggs in one basket, but it was an advantage the griffins simply didn't have an answer for, yet. I angled myself towards the camp's communication center. I had a letter to drop off. If I didn't, she'd worry more and she had enough to worry about. At least by the time this one arrived, the battle would be over. One way or another. Author's note, little movement on the front but the Allied army has pushed to where it saw its attempt to stop their flight fail. If you are enjoying this story, please consider taking a look at Crystal and Maya's website quillandblade.com for extra content such as mini-stories, an Ask Us form to submit questions, responses to said questions, and special rewards for the awesome folks who support our Patreon. End author's note.